So maybe this whole profession of a philosopher of science is a bit of a fraud, because they seem to be so far removed from their presumed subject.
Yeah.
But how does that relate to, I mean, let's talk about some well-known, well, let's say famous philosophers of science that people talk about, and how about Popper and the Popperians, who arguably Popper, I would say, played a big role in making philosophy of science more broadly interesting and popular among social scientists. And there was a debate, I mean, eventually the outcome of the debate was that there was no more interest generally in philosophy of science. But what about Popper and the Popperians and Kuhn and Feyerabend and the ones that have,
I think Popper has two great virtues. One is that he writes or he wrote clearly, with a minimum of technical terms, and he wanted to be understood because he thought clearly. And the second is that he was a very good defender of realism. But he had no autonomy, he had no ethics, and so his position concerning the exercise was very weak. For instance, he was very to admit the existence of the reality, or the truth of parapsychology, and he was very angry with me when I wrote a paper criticizing the steady state theory in cosmology, which postulated, among other things, that matter is being created all the time ex nihilo, from nothing. So it's a scientific theory because it is reputable. Many ideas are reputable, but you don't get in the workplace for refuting, for instance, the hypothesis of the existence of Big Food. You need positive evidence in addition to that. For instance, if someone claims that AIDS is caused by a certain virus, but you have to show that the virus exists, and moreover, you have to show the effect it has on animals. And you need positive proof, you need positive evidence, not only negative evidence. If Lemaire comes with the idea that, or others, that there is a planet, a new planet called Uranus, well, someone has to find it. It's not enough to refute a very proposition that there are no planets in that region. You have to exhibit an image of the planet and so on and so forth. So his negativism is exaggerated. And it's
also quite unhelpful, or to say stronger, useless for a practicing scientist, which I actually experienced personally in trying to use the philosophy as my guiding philosophy.
And yet, Popper is the only philosopher of science that scientists read nowadays. Is younger. They also used to read it, even quote Kuhn, but everyone has realized by now that the whole Kuhn thesis is a fraud. And even also in the case of Fire, his close friend and follower, the idea that there are no standards, that anything goes, and things like that. So, but
do you think those were, that Kuhn and Feyerabend were in a way, I don't want to say logical, but logical in quotation marks, outgrowths of Popper's philosophy?
No, I don't think that. Feyerabend certainly knew Popper's philosophy. He was Popper's assistant for a while, but he didn't have the patience all the intelligence to study the things necessary to refute proper effectively. Also, he became a postmodernist, a total rationalist. He said there is nothing to prevent the scientists from believing that there are ghosts and demons and so on and so forth. He talked about the tyranny of science, and he had an artistic temperament, as you know. Once he called me from Florida, saying he was very proud because he had just been offered the deanship of the School of Art, music or theater, I don't remember. And as you know, he was for a while, he was in East Berlin trying to learn better Brecht's theater techniques. And he was a dilettante. He was not a serious scholar. He was a dilettante, like many others. Most philosophers are dilettantes. They read this and that. They never sit a few years, try to work things out. There's no time they have to publish. They have to produce papers in order to make promotions and so on and so forth. But in any case, I think finite habits has been forgotten for not so cool. Like Cool is still being quoted, and you still have to argue with people. But then finally, as you know, Kuhn owes his celebrity to things that he has never done. For instance, during the student revolution in Germany, students took his scientific revolutions to be a revolutionary manifesto. They didn't know that Kuhn was very conservative, that Kuhn was horrified by revolutions, at least political revolutions. And of course, they didn't know that there have been only two real scientific revolutions in history. First, the birth of science in Greece, and second, the scientific revolution of the 17th century. All others are breakthroughs, but not revolutions, because they were partial alterations, not complete changes in the worldview. But in any case, no, I think Kuhn was a sincere guy, but totally confused, utterly confused. There is this famous interview of the journalist who went to my team, and he asked him, Kuhn, so you believe that every time there is a scientific revolution, the world changes. The world itself, of course, it changes. And do you really believe, the second question, do you believe that the world exists outside your brain? Yes, of course it does. He saw no incompatibility between the two things. He was very superficial. And his analysis and Fireman's analysis of the theory of relativity was totally wrong. It took just one formula out of context, and it was wrong, a wrong analysis. They didn't have a deep understanding of science. But